Hello. Now, what we're going to talk about today is how the court system works. And it's sad and it's terrible, but you need to know this. How it's moved from common law, the law of the land, and morphed into a monetary scheme. And private citizens are being charged as corporations, corporate drivers. This video piggybacks off the last one, how the Catholic Church owns you, and they do. And to get a better idea of how all this is connected, I recommend watching that one. But for now, we'll just do a crash course like this. In 1302, Pope Boniface VIII passes the papal bull Unum Sanctum, right? And that's he makes the first express trust in history. Right, and what's interesting to note also about old Boniface VIII is his contemporary at the time, Dante Alighieri, who wrote the Divine Comedy, has Boniface VIII burning in one of the lower levels of hell because of what he did right here, basically claiming all the souls on earth for the Catholic Church. Right, in 1454, Pope Nicholas V creates the first testamentary trust called Romanus Pontifex, right? And then in 1481, Pope Sixtus IV created another testamentary trust called Aeterni Regis, eternal kings, kings forever. Right? And then lastly, we talked about Sedi KVs. And that's a French term meaning he who lives. And a Sedi KV trust is defined as a person whose life measures the duration of a trust, a gift, a state, or an assurance contract. Remember, this was passed in 1666, when the Great Plague of London was going around, and they just assumed everybody was dead. They just assumed everybody was dead, and then the state held their estate for a trust until he who lives comes forward and shows proof of life. All of these are trusts. Now, what is a trust? A trust is an arrangement whereby a person, the trustee, holds property as its normal owner for the good of one or more beneficiaries. Now, when you're born, your parents register you. Register, right? That's where we get the word register. Register the king. They register you with the state. They got your birth certificate as proof of life, and your Sedi KV trust is opened. He who lives. You're alive now, right? Your trust, your estate is opened, and the state becomes your trustee as you're the registered beneficiary of your trust. Now, all this trust jargon is relevant because when you go to court, they create a constructive trust, and they charge you with statutes and codes, like a corporation. If you look up the legalese definition of a person, it's doublespeak. A legal person refers to a human or a non-human entity that is treated as a person for legal purposes. So there you go. They're attempting to rope in human flesh and blood beings with corporations. That's what non-human entity means. You only ever used to go to court when you trespassed against another person or their property. Like, your fence got destroyed by old man farmer Greg. His cattle came over and smashed your property, and so you go in there and be like, right? Somebody trespassed against your person or your property. Very simple. That's what was known as common law. So simple that the common man could understand it. No bureaucracy involved. But if you go to court now, or if you have ever been to court, more likely than not, you were in violation of some statute or code, and those only apply to corporations, but they're roping everybody in as corporations. For instance, speeding. Corporate drivers can't speed because they're liable for the goods that they're hauling for the corporation that they're working for. Failing to stop at a red light, corporate driver. Not using your turn signal, that's corporate stuff. Driving in an HOV lane, corporate. Not wearing your seatbelt, talking on your cell phone, driving under the influence, driving without registration or insurance. These are all statutes and codes that corporate drivers have to adhere to. We, as common man on the land, unless you trespass against someone's person or property, there is no crime. Some of you watching may think, well, speeding, running a red light, drinking and driving, they're all for people's protection. No, that's indoctrination. That's mind control, really. Because regardless of what anybody tells you, as a free man on the land, you can do whatever you want, unless you trespass against someone's person or their property. And even with laws like murder, they have those in place, but still people are going to do what they want to do. If somebody gets mad enough, they're going to murder you, right? So it's non-consequential what the laws are. People are still going to do what they want to do. You should be able to cover yourself in peanut butter, snort all the cocaine you want, and have a 16 hooker gangbang, right? Who are you hurting? You're not hurting anybody. Why is prostitution illegal? It's your body. To consenting adults, there is no issue here. What's the issue? Why is it illegal? Oh, that's right, because the government isn't getting their piece. They're not getting their cut. You cannot tell people what they can and cannot do. That's called tyranny, all right? And same with what's going on right now with this COVID pandemic, right? Only 150,000 people have died, and it's all in the name of public safety, why you cannot do these things, right? Well, last year, 1.5 million people died of tuberculosis. Why weren't you wearing a mask during the tuberculosis pandemic? Oh, because the TV didn't tell you to. All right, unless you trespass against someone's person or property, there is no crime. Nobody can tell you what you can and cannot do. That's called tyranny. But the voice of justice falls on deaf ears. We have forgotten. Land of the free, home of the brave? Absolutely not. So how do I know all of this, right? Because I was stopped for bogus charges. I did some studying. I typed up my own affidavit, and I represented myself in court. I almost missed my 3rd degree in Freemasonry, right, because of all this stuff. And it's kind of poetic in a way, because here I am joining Freemasonry, learning about the founding fathers and their struggle with church and state, and at the exact same time, I had to stand up for myself. So yeah, I ended up going to jail for a year, being held at $2.5 million bail, and I hurt no one. I was in jail with Christian Francois, who is better known as Beardo the bank robber. His bail was $750,000. He robbed 9 banks. I was in jail with Tony and John Reed, these guys from Oso who killed their neighbors after some mudslide, right? Their bail was $5 million. And here I am in jail for a year, $2.5 million, and I hurt no one. It's fraud. So let's play this out, right? You get pulled over for speeding. The cop smells marijuana, and you're getting arrested, even though you've trespassed against no one's person or their property. Right now, this officer reads you your Miranda rights, and he also asks you at the end, do you understand these rights? Now let's pause right there. Number 1, why are they offering you a new set of rights? Aren't you afforded your constitutional ones? Think about that. And number 2, when the cop asks, do you understand these rights? He doesn't mean, do you comprehend what I'm saying? They're speaking legalese. It's double meaning of the word, like the double meaning of the word person. What they're really doing is offering you a verbal contract. Do you understand these rights? And when you say yes, You're allowing authority over you. He doesn't even know what he's saying. He's a dupe. He's thinking he's doing the right thing. Think of it like this. All right? It's assumed in the West that God is real. And we get all of our natural intrinsic rights. That's what the Constitution says. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, right? We get our natural intrinsic rights, natural rights from God, right? And down here, here's man on the land. Common law, right? Everybody's subject to the same laws, right? Humans understand God. They understand the authority of God. God does, he's the creator. We don't have any authority over him. We understand God much like your children, your kids. Your kids understand you. And just like your dog, right? The dog understands the kids. It's like a statue thing. It has nothing to do with, do you understand these rights? It's not, do you comprehend? It's, do you understand? Do you submit to these rights? And this is a fraud. You are not knowingly consenting to this verbal contract. A free consent is said to be free when it is not caused by coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, or mistake. This cop is mistakenly misrepresenting an offer to you, and it's fraud. And you can legally void that contract. You don't have to play the game. Right? And somewhere along the way, we've forgotten that man created government to secure our just rights, but somehow we think that we, man on the land, understand government. But it's not so. The puppeteer is not subject to the puppet, right? He created it, right? Maybe a poor example, but that's what's going on there. These cop shows and these judge shows are all programming. They're indoctrinating you, getting you used to the verbiage so you consent to those rights without question. And I bet even though you've never even been to jail, you can say some of the words, right? You have the right to remain silent. Everything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law, right? Like, you know this stuff, and it's just from watching TV or movies, right? Now, when you go to court, everything that happens in court is ecclesiastical. Court, what's another name for court? An oratory. The judge or commissioner, right? He's an ordinary. There's the judge, the clerk. The clerk, that's Latin for clericus. Cleric. And you've got you right here, and then you've got the prosecutor right here. The prosecutor is an executor. An executor, a person who produces something or puts something into effect. The summons, the discovery against you. Right? So, you're in court, they set up a constructive trust. A constructive trust is a legal concept created by the courts that describes the remedy that can be sought when a person holds the legal right to property that he should not be able to keep. Your money, essentially. When you're driving around and you commit one of these violations of statutes and codes, you're in violation and they can take your money at that point. So the judge, he's not really controlled here. He's the administrator. The clerk is the trustee, and you are the beneficiary of your trust. So when standing in front of the judge, the commissioner, right, they'll either ask you or have you state your name for the record. But just like with this cop and his question, do you understand? The judge is looking at papers with your all caps name, your cest KV trust. And when you agree to being that non-human entity, that all caps name, you can be charged with statutes and codes that only apply to corporations. Remember, Sesti KV means, let's do this, Sesti KV is French for he who lives. And so when you go to court and you say, yes, I am that person, you breathe life into that trust, he who lives, making it a flesh and blood entity unknowingly to you. And it's fraud, because a corporation cannot sign documents for itself. There has to be some flesh and blood person representing that corporation to bring it life and execute the sentence to sign for it. Nobody else can do it but you. Right? So when you go to court and you refuse to be the name, that's when shit rolls downhill. They're operating trust law right under our noses by use of the all caps name. And this method is called capitis diminutio. Capitis diminutio. Right? And it's the loss of liberty, citizenship, and family, ergo, slave, prisoner of war. They could just as easily put your name, uppercase, lowercase, on all of your legal documents. But they don't. They're not using proper nouns. So what, America, with all of its power, can't type uppercase, lowercase on their legal documents? No. They could just as easily do it, but they don't. They choose not to, and the distinction is right here. When America declared bankruptcy, March 9th, 1933, and Smedley Butler spoiled the coup d'etat by telling FDR about the plot that was going to overthrow America, we got the Social Security Act in 35. That number is attached to your name, to your trust fund. And all of England's crown colonies has one. America has a Social Security number, the United Kingdom has the National Insurance Number, Canada has the Social Insurance Number, South Africa has the South African Identity Number, Australia has the Centrelink Customer Number, and New Zealand has the Inland Revenue Department Number. We are all crown colonies of England. We're all serialized goods. Sestui KV trusts, right? And even if I'm wrong about all this, which I'm not, and I'll show you my legal documents to prove it, right? But even if I'm wrong, the fact remains, unless you trespass against someone's person or their property, there is no crime. Now grab your ID or your mail or your birth certificate or your social security card, because I'm going to show you this right now. All right, now. Here's my birth certificate right here. Right, all caps name, Benjamin Woodbury. Where down here, they put my parents in proper nouns. They could have just as easily done it for me, but they didn't. Right? Then here, the Department of Licensing, issuing a letter to my estate, but at the end of the document, because the corporation can't sign for itself, they want the proper noun to sign. Right, Sesti KV, bringing life, he who lives. Here's the affidavit that I typed up and represented myself in court with. As you can see, Snohomish County District Court, State of Washington, Cascade Division, the State of Washington, in all caps name, right? The corporation, you got some prosecutor pretending to be the state. Benjamin Woodbury, a third-party intervener. I did not admit to being the name. I was executor of the legal estate, Woodbury Benjamin D. Moving sui juris, right? That means I'm of lawful age and I conduct my own affairs. Affidavit. And this is what I wrote. Ben Woodbury, affiant, third-party intervener, occupant of the General Executor Office of the Legal Estate, Woodbury Benjamin D., the all-caps name, Benjamin D. Woodbury, sui juris, known to be a creditable, sentient live being of lawful age, duly affirms on his oath, deposes and says, Ben Woodbury, here referred to after as the one, affiant, a sentient life being, third party of the intervener, blah, 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 right? One believes the revised Code of Washington, Title 46.61.502, the revised Code of Washington, Title 46.20.308, are in violation of my 10th Amendment and my common law and natural law rights. One is of the opinion that all statutory regulations, the Washington Revised Statutes, are in violation of my common law and natural rights. One is not a public servant, and any claim to the contrary must be provided by payroll record and the alleged public servant title, sworn under penalty of perjury and full commercial liability. One does not operate for profit business on the highways, roads, or streets of any city, county, or the state of Washington using a commercial motor vehicle. One claims a common law jurisdiction at all times. One does not consent to this unlawful proceeding, and one waives the compelled benefit. One does not surrender any natural or common law rights in these proceedings. One does not plead to courts of contract, or courts of admiralty. And then signed and dated September 25th, 2013. Now, it's just like with this Black Lives Matter movement. Unless enough people rise up and stand up and say that this is fraud and bullshit, nothing's going to change. We need more people to stand up.